Baseball is back. We continue to preview the second half with two special guests, Adam the Bull and Meghan Montemurro, next.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Matt Cozy, and I'm a lifelong fan taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Thank you for being part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, like the video, and comment anything below. Today's episode is presented by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your rivals. Check out Booking.com for your stay today. Sam Olber will be back on Monday, and Adam the Bull is with me to lead off the show, and Meghan Montemurro from the Chicago Tribune will join me later on. Adam is well known for his time at 92.3, The Fan in Cleveland, WFAN in New York, and is now the host of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show on the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as The Bullpen on the Bet Rivers Network. Both of these shows can be found on YouTube as well as Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcast. Adam is a diehard Cubs fan from Brooklyn.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being on. And can you please
tell
us about your Cubs fan origins?
I get this question a lot, of course, because people are just always stunned when they find out I'm a Cubs fan. And recently, I've had people say, "Oh, you just became a Cubs fan." I'm like, no, I've suffered my entire life, so I deserve some happiness. Thanks, Matt, for having me. I don't get to talk about the Cubs often because here in Cleveland, people don't want to hear about the Cubs. You know, the Cubs and Guardians, or at the time Indians, you kind of felt like you had a brotherhood, and then that all ended in 2016, of course. It was very awkward for me that year, but in the end, I can't feel bad for myself because the Cubs turned out on top. If the Guardians, and I've lived here 13 years, so I want the Guardians to win the World Series really badly. And if the Cubs are not going to win, I want the Guardians to win, and I don't think the Cubs are going to win this year. But to answer your question, so my dad was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and when the Dodgers left Brooklyn for Los Angeles, some people in Brooklyn, just stayed Dodger fans and rooted for them in LA, but most did not. And they just kind of became free agent fans, if you will, in those days. Now, a lot of those fans just waited a few years, and then eventually the Mets came to be in 1962, and they became Met fans. But my dad was a big Ernie Banks fan. He just loved baseball, and he really liked Ernie Banks. And so he switched allegiances from the Dodgers to the Cubs. And that obviously happened before I was born. I was born in 1971. So by the time I was around, he was a diehard Cubs fan. The funny thing is, though, I almost never got to watch the Cubs as a kid, because even though a lot of people around the country got to watch WGN, of course, in Brooklyn, we didn't have cable. I didn't know anybody who had cable until I don't think I had cable till I was probably around 87, 88, 89, whatever. I graduated high school in 89. It was somewhere around there. So the only time I could watch the Cubs was when they play the Mets, of course. There was no interleague in those days, so they never played the Yankees. Occasionally, it'd be on the Saturday game of the week or whatever. I'd listen to them on the radio. Sometimes I could pick it up out of Chicago. When they played the Phillies, I would always listen to them on the radio against the Phillies. And then I would have to just call. I don't know if you're a lot younger than me. How old are you? Are you 30?
Yeah, 33.
Yeah. So you probably don't remember this, but when I was a kid, there was a phone number you called. I think I still remember it. I believe it was 976-1313, and it was called Sports Phone.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, because you know what? I think it was based out of Chicago, believe it or not.
It was.
Right? David Schuster. He's still around, isn't he?
He is. David Schuster, yeah.
I think I remember him doing the score, and I'd call every 10 minutes. Now, for most
Les
of
Grobstein. Les Grobstein was on there.
That's another name. Exactly.
Yeah.
So for my early years, I probably started paying attention, 76, 77, when I was like 7 years old.
Sure.
Obviously, the Cubs sucked all those years. And then finally in 84, they got good. And, I would go to Shea Stadium when they would play the Mets. And I went to Veterans Stadium at the time a couple of times. But it was weird. Eventually, one of my good friends got one of those old school giant satellite dishes. Do you remember those things?
Yeah.
And so then I'd finally be able to get WGN. It's just so amazing. Now I can watch every game. But anyway, that's how it started. And the reason, believe it or not, well, I guess it makes sense. But the reason my nickname is the Bull is because when I was a kid, I played first base. And the Cubs first baseman at the time, of course, was Leon Bull Durham. And when I was a big kid, so my friends all started calling me Bull, and it just kind of took off as my nickname.
What a story! Thanks for going through all that. Wow,
got it.
So I had a couple email exchanges with Adam this week to try to get him on the show, and he kindly responded to me. Opening sentence, quote, "I am an angry Cubs fan," and then there was some more after that.
Yes.
Why are you angry with this season, or maybe even beyond what has happened with only these 98 games?
Yeah, I guess there was part of me that thought once they won the World Series in 2016 that I could just, after that, whatever. It's like a lot of us that were older fans, and not that I was that old. I mean, I was in my 2016, so I was 45. I think a lot of us were like, now I can die, or anything else is gravy. But that doesn't last very long. Now I want more. I don't want to win just one World Series. At the very least, I want them to be competitive every year. And first of all, I give the owner credit, a little bit of credit. I'm not a fan, but I give him some credit, right? He spent more money than past regimes did in Chicago. The past regimes were worse than him. And he's done some good things. I like that they're fixing up the stadium. Now, a lot of it is greed. He owns all this stuff. And so it's a mixed bag. And, I don't live in Chicago, so I don't have to deal with the consequences of roads being shut down and all that stuff. But so I give him some credit. But I've always felt that the owner's got to go all the way. The Cubs are a gold mine. Outside of probably the Yankees and the Dodgers, maybe Boston, I guess maybe the Mets, but probably not. The Cubs got to be making more money than every team in baseball by a lot. So there should be the Cubs should never make a decision based on money. And that doesn't mean they got to pay every guy. It turned out they were smart not to sign Javi Baez. Turned out they were smart not to sign Chris Bryant. I think they were smart not to sign Wilson Contreras. I would have re-signed Anthony Rizzo, but they made a fair offer. I think they made a fair offer to him. It didn't work out. But all these other guys, they look smart for not letting them go. But it goes back to me when they let Kyle Schwarber, when they non-tendered Kyle Schwarber. That was absurd. And I understand COVID, but that's not an excuse for the Cubs. This family and this guy is a multi-millionaire, billionaire, whatever the hell he is. And no decision should ever be made because of money. That's it. Now, again, like I said, you think Javi Baez is going to go off the cliff, which he has. I mean, none of us thought he'd be this bad. It's unbelievable. Chris Bryant, obviously, it's been more about injury than, but even when he's played, he hasn't been that good. But still, that's fine. But the Cubs should be able to sign anybody. They should, if they think a guy is good, there should be never an excuse of money. They should be able to pay as much as any team in baseball. I don't care, $300 million, $400 million, whatever it's going to take. I wanted Ohtani.
Of course.
So let's go. You're the Cubs. Fans go into that ballpark every freaking game. Doesn't matter. I know back in the day when I was a kid, 70s, early 80s, it wasn't like that. But for the last 30 years plus, the place is packed all the time. Even when the team sucks, fans are in there. So the fans deserve more. And that's why I'm pissed 100%. Off. And this year's been a huge disappointment because I thought they'd be good. And maybe I conned myself. And, the pitching's been damn good, the starting pitching. But their bullpen is a disgrace. They spent no money in the bullpen. Absolute trash. And the lineup's been a huge disappointment. I mean, Dansby Swanson, I don't need another feel-good story about Dansby Swanson. Guy's been a huge disappointment since they've signed him. I love Seiya. I think he's done a really good job overall. I think they were right not to give a big contract to Bellinger. We're seeing that this year. I want Pete Crow Armstrong to play every day. Let's go. Stop messing around here. Anyway, so I'm frustrated. I thought Craig Counsell would be a miracle worker, and he hasn't. It's 1 year. I'm not going to kill him. I know he's a good manager, but.
Well, we've discussed Counsell a lot on this show because we admired him from across the field. And with this mostly same group of players from last year, I think maybe we did overvalue the manager position a little bit.
Maybe. Yeah. And let me ask you this, Matt.
Go ahead, Adam.
Why, when you're the Chicago Cubs, is Miles freaking Mastrobuoni ever in the starting lineup? No offense, he may be a
Morel can't play third.
Morel can't?
He can't play third. He's bad.
He's terrible. You're 100% right. But you got to find somebody else. I don't want to see Nick Madrigal. I'm done with Nick Madrigal.
David Bodie.
I'm done with David Bodie.
Patrick Wisdom.
Oh, God, don't even get me started on him. All these guys. These guys are nothing players. I want good players. Let's go.
So they went here. You're preaching to the choir here. I love this. So they had the really bad 2 months, but they went into the break winners 8 of their last 11, which was a very pleasant surprise. And we hope the turnaround, of course, continues. But it comes with this unique timeline with such a short runway to the trade deadline.
Yeah.
There's only 10 games to the deadline.
Yeah.
So we'll see if Jed Hoyer buys, sells, or holds. How much importance do you place on these next 10 games? Because I place a lot of importance on them.
I'm torn because as a fan, you always want your team to go for it, right?
Yes.
And we could point to last year where the Diamondbacks and the Rangers were the last 2 teams to make the playoffs, and then they went to the World Series. The problem is, I think there's a couple of guys they could trade.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Jameson Taillon.
Okay.
He's been great. He's been really good this year. I didn't like it when they signed him. And obviously he was terrible for most of last year, but at the end of last year, he pitched well. And this year he's pitched well. I'm not a believer in him. I would trade him if I could, because I don't think his value is ever going to be higher. Right. Now, I don't know what they could get, but I would trade him. And that's not going to help me, the Cubs, get to the World Series. I don't think the Cubs can win a World Series this year. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say it. And as a fan, I think it's a loser mentality that I'm having right now. I got to rip myself for that. But I don't think they're going to win this year because I just think the team is just not that good outside of the rotation. And I'm not trading Justin Steele.
No.
I've heard some rumors about that. No, thanks. I want to win next year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I could get a good package for Taillon, and I don't want low-level minor leaguers. I want guys that are ready to play in the big leagues now. That's it. I'm not interested in A-ball pitchers, A-ball players. And I would obviously consider trading Bellinger, although with his injury, I don't know that's going to be possible. But that's what I would do. And I like I said, I hate myself for saying it because part of me wants them to go for it and thinks they can get a run. And obviously they're only 3.5 or 3, whatever it is. I can't remember now off the top of my head, out of the wild card. But they did play better, although that doubleheader against the Cardinals on Saturday was disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
But they overall played better. They had a nice series against Baltimore, which I was impressed how they played there. But I think the smart thing to do is to trade Taillon if you can, because I think you can get because there's a lot of teams. The Guardians. I've been talking here. Let's go. Let's do a little Guardians. Cubs trade. The Guardians.
Orioles could be a good match for Taillon.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I am torn, but yes, to answer your initial question as I'm rambling on and on here, I do think we saw it last year that the Cubs made that run before the deadline instead of selling or staying put. They bought. If we talk again a week from now or 10 days from now and they've gone 8-2, I might have a different attitude. Because I did like, and I'm not going to, I was so frustrated with the team, but when they played well before the break, I was kind of getting excited again. Even though
they sucked us back in.
Bulls. Yeah, they sucked us back in. They did. I was done. I was like, that's it.
Right.
That Baltimore series especially really sucked me back in.
Right, because they're one of the best teams in baseball.
Yeah.
By a lot.
Yes.
And the Cubs outscored them 21-2.
It was a good series. But the bats is just no consistency with the offense.
Right. And they started 17-9. The offense was consistent.
Yeah. Great. It was great at the beginning of the year.
Maybe they're leveling off now to a point where they will just be better now moving forward.
Yeah.
Especially
I like Bush.
Hap, Suzuki, and Bush have been excellent.
They have. I'm good with those guys. I know Horner hasn't been great, but I wouldn't trade him. I still like him a lot. They have a core of guys I like. I know people aren't sold on Pete Crow Armstrong, and I know he hasn't hit, but I want to see him. I want to see him play.
Of course, I agree with you.
You know, we got to start getting these guys and you know, these prospects that have been talked about. Let's see what he's got. He plays every day. How he's going to hit. So I don't know. Say has been great. Michael Bush, that was a great trade with the Dodgers. And I'm always nervous when you trade with the Dodgers.
Oh yeah.
You always feel like you're going to get screwed. But anyway, so there's positives about the organization.
Yes.
There's definitely negatives. The GM's pissed me off. I mean, you know, let's go. I want to sign. So I know I just talked about Michael Bush, and I'm like, they should sign Pete Alonso this offseason.
right.
Although Pete Alonso will probably go off the cliff in 2 years. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I want that big. I want some guys
with big name
home runs. Yes.
Here's what you want. Here's what we want. We want a star player.
Yes.
They don't have a star.
No. I got to have a star at Wrigley Field. And by the way, speaking of which, I don't know if I'm in the minority. You tell me, Matt.
Okay.
The Cubs better get. You mind if I curse? Or you
Go ahead.
Not want curse? If you don't want cursing, I won't curse.
Well, we're not supposed to.
Oh, we're not supposed to? All right, I'm not going to curse.
That's what our channel manager told
us. The Cubs better get their you-know-what together with Sammy Sosa and invite him back into the fold. All right? It's enough already.
Right.
The Cubs have been a disgrace when it comes to Sammy Sosa. Did he cork his bat? Yes, he did. That was stupid. Did he use steroids? He did. But everybody else was using steroids at that time. He was an amazing superstar. He loved being a Chicago Cub. He wasn't even from America, and he loved representing, run out with the flag after 9/11. This guy loved everything about America. He loved everything about baseball. He loved everything about the Cubs. He was a great Cub, and I'm just sick of this garbage that the organization has just moved him along. He was awesome. How much fun did we have watching Sammy Sosa play?
Great.
Must-watch TV.
It totally defined my childhood.
Yes.
Wow. Adam, it sounds like you need a spot to talk Cubs.
I do. I could go on. We keep going. I mean, I don't know if it's too long here, but I could go on for another hour.
Well, I think we should try to do something like monthly or something like that for you to join Sam and I.
Yeah, we'll do it, and we'll see how they go. But man, I'm frustrated.
Yes, I can hear it in your voice.
Yes, but I will say I do like a lot of the kids they got in the system right now. I think there's a lot of potential, but you got to give those guys a chance to play. And in the same vein, they got to get a star. I need a star here, and Cody Bellinger's not it. Dansby Swanson's not it.
Right.
I want to I wanted Ohtani so bad. I knew it wasn't going to happen. I think Shohei Ohtani, and people are going to say I'm out of my mind, is the greatest baseball player who's ever lived. And I don't care what anybody else says. Don't tell me about Babe Ruth, because Babe Ruth didn't have to face black players. He didn't have to travel all over the country. I don't want to hear it. And he only hit and pitched for 1 year together.
Mm-hmm.
For those who know the history, Babe Ruth pitched early with Boston. He was pretty much only a pitcher in Boston. And then he had 1 year where he did both and was great at both. Kudos to him. He would not be the same player in this modern era. He was fat. He was out of shape. He was great. But let me tell you something. Shohei Ohtani is like nothing. This guy is the top 5 pitcher and the top 5 hitter. It's insane. And the Cubs should have paid him $1 billion, whatever it took. I wanted him as a Cub, and I was a freaking Dodger. I hate the Dodgers. I hate the Cardinals. I hate the Dodgers. I hate the Yankees, and I hate the Mets. Those 4 teams, I don't want them ever to win. And the Reds, throw them in there too. Even though I'm a Bengals fan. Even though I'm a Bengals fan. Oh, yeah, and the Brewers. The Brewers too. I'm leaving out the Brewers. The Cardinals piss me off because, every time I go to Wrigley Field, and I try to get there a couple times a year, although I haven't gone this year. I don't know if I'm actually going to go this year, but I'm going to go when the Cubs are coming to Cleveland this year. So we need a high-speed train so I can get to Chicago in like 60 minutes.
That'd be great, yeah.
Be beautiful. But every time I've gone to Wrigley for a Cubs-Cardinal game, the Cardinals fans are so obnoxious. They are the Yankee fans of the Midwest. That's what they are. They think they're the Yankees. They're all snobby. It's a good baseball town, I will admit it. It's because they don't have any other sports. What else is there hell to do in St. Louis? It's a boring town. Nobody cares about your stupid arch. The arch is boring. It's uninteresting. Chicago's great. It's my favorite city that I've never lived in. I love Cleveland. It's an awesome city, an underrated city. New York, I'm from. Chicago's awesome, especially in the summer, although it sucks in the winter. But so does everywhere else in the north.
Adam the Bull, thank you so much for being on. That was classic.
You got it, man. Thanks, man. Anytime.
Today's episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, with summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games. It's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yes, we're talking about your rival cities. With hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival cities. From hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. for your summer travel this MLB season. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals. Book today on Booking.com, on the site, or in the Booking.com app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players, pick more or less, 2 more player stats, and then watch the winnings roll in. Baseball season is well underway, so don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks entries, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs. Take your pick of more or less and add them to your Prize Picks entry. Prize Picks is really simple to play, with your entries taking less than 60 seconds to submit, turning $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps of your screen. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's a first deposit match up to $100 by using code LOCKEDONMLB. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Cubs play the Diamondbacks at 1:20 p.m. Central Friday, and you can hear every pitch of the Cubs hometown broadcast on SiriusXM by searching Cubs on the SXM app. All right, I don't know how else to say this, but that was a fantastic segment by Adam the Bull, and as you're hearing me now, I've already recorded with Meghan Montemurro, which was fantastic. So I'm going to keep this middle segment very short because those 2 people being on really is the show today, and it was a pleasure to change it up a little bit for this one, and worked out really well. Very happy about that. My original idea, again, was to have all the Locked On hosts who are Cubs fans, and was able to have Adam the Bull on, which was really cool. And then Meghan Montemurro from the Chicago Tribune, great guest as well. 1:20, 6:15, and 1:20 are the first pitch times this weekend. Saturday's game will be televised nationally on Fox. We do know Justin Steele is pitching on Friday, but as of my recording time here on Thursday morning, we don't know who's pitching Saturday and Sunday. The Diamondbacks were 7 games under 500 on the last day of May, but now enter the second half at 49-48 and only 1 game out of the third wild card spot. Again, this is the team that knocked the Cubs out of contention last year. They then proceeded to go all the way to the World Series. They have 3 absolute stalwarts in the lineup: Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, and Christian Walker. We'll stay tuned on how their rotation lines up. But this is a big series for the North Siders. Coming up next, the Chicago Tribune's Meghan Montemurro. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. The reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the biz and talk to a real person every time. You can also take advantage of their Trade Master program, where you get a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks. That's supplyhouse.com. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wound down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Daily baseball. We have the British Open going on right now. We have the Olympics soon. There's plenty over at fanduel.com/locked on, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are now pleased to be joined by the Chicago Tribune's Meghan Montemurro, who's in her 4th season on the beat covering the Cubs. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The Cubs went into the break winners of 8 of their last 11 games. From your perspective, how have they been able to do that after the bad stretch the previous 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 key things is the rotation has still been, for the most part, lights out. And anytime you have a group that's giving you a chance to win and keeping you in it for at least, the first 6, 7 innings, that's really going to position you well. So I think you can't overlook what the rotation has continued to do, even as the offense hasn't been able to get going. And then just on the offensive side, you're finally seeing some guys start to get hot. Ian Happ has largely been locked in the last couple weeks. Michael Busch, obviously one of the best rookies in the league this year. He's still been swinging it well. But you're seeing, say, Suzuki start to look a lot better, starting to drive the ball. And I think really importantly, they're starting to get a little bit going in the bottom third of the lineup. You're just not going to win a lot of games if you're relying on your, top 6 hitters. So, Pete Armstrong having a big game Sunday, the best offensive game of his big league career. Tomas Nido, Miguel Amaya, you're starting to see a little bit more there. Dansby Swanson, the last 2 series is maybe finally getting going if he can roll it over more than 2 series. So you're starting to see some signs that it's a more complete lineup top to bottom. And honestly, that's what they're going to need if they're getting back into this. They need to be able to rely on multiple guys. It cannot be just Ian Happ and Michael Busch, especially with Cody Bellinger out potentially through July. So yeah, you have to have more guys step up, and they finally were starting to see some signs of that.
Based on the premise of getting back into playoff contention, and I like how you put it earlier this week in one of your stories in the Trib, the Cubs are going for their first postseason berth since 2018 in a full 162. If they're trying to make that their goal still, despite the roller coaster this year, how much importance do you place on winning this very first series out of the break? Because that's what we previewed earlier in the show. Mm-hmm. What do you think about getting 2 out of 3 right away against the D-backs?
I mean, I think it's extremely important. Not only do you want to set a good tone, but Diamondbacks are a team that, they're chasing and competing for in the wild card. And so, they cannot afford to be dropping games against teams that are in front of them. I mean, they're already, again, in a very bad spot where I think they're at 4 teams at least ahead of them in the wild card that also own the tiebreaker over them. And I think their final series against the Cardinals, they need to either sweep the series or at least take 2 of the games. And so, everyone saw what happened last year when you don't own the tiebreakers. That makes things even more challenging. So they need to play well this weekend against Arizona. Obviously, it helps, Justin Steele starting Friday really has a chance to set the tone as he's been doing lately. And yeah, I don't want to put too much emphasis on one series because there's still 2.5 months to go. But, it's something Craig Counsell has talked about lately, every game is a big game. They have to win. They know that. They're not at the point where they can't acknowledge that or ignore that anymore. So yeah, I think it's really important that they play well this weekend and win the series.
You may have already mentioned this in your first couple responses. Who or what is the biggest question mark in this half?
Ooh, I mean, I think I'm going Christopher Morel.
Okay.
Obviously, I mean, some good signs against Sunday with his first career multi-homer game, but they need more. I mean, and like, to be fair, like, the underlying metrics for most of the season indicated he was doing everything right and just was literally one of the unluckiest players in the league. But I think you look at his last couple weeks, he's definitely been more in a slump. And if they're not really necessarily trusting him at third base, which based on Miles Mastrobuoni's usage and even David Bodie in late game situations, like, clearly that trust is still not there, understandably. So he's going to have to hit. And so the results need to start to come at this point, especially as you start to see some of those unlucky metrics start to shift against him. And so, yeah, I think he needs to step up. Like, that is a bat that they were obviously counting on taking a step forward this season. There's still 2.5 months. There's still time for that to happen. But there's certainly a lot more questions about him and his fit on this team, both positionally and just offensively. So they really need to see more from him.
He's been now thrust into the 2 spot in the order. And this is Michael Busch I'm now speaking of. How important is it that he continues his trends if they want to continue the turnaround? Because we talked a lot about on this show about Horner, Swanson, Morel, Bellinger, Happen, Suzuki, kind of being the main 6 that we knew about. And a lot of them were underwhelming early on. Now we see Happen, Suzuki really stepping up their game. We see Horner in this 11-game stretch stepping up his game. You've already spoken to Morel and Swanson, and then, we'll see about Bellinger when he comes back. How important is it that Michael Busch continues his way?
I think it's huge. I mean, obviously, both short-term and long-term.
Yeah.
Council's made very clear he's their everyday first baseman. I think it'll be interesting to see how many starts he gets against left-handers over these next 2.5 weeks. I would expect it to increase just based on how he's looked and the quality of at-bats he gives, even if, he's not doing the same level of damage. He's shown patience. He's drawing walks. He's aggressive early in counts. I think he's up to 5 first pitch homers of at-bats. And so I think he's gotten through. He had maybe 3-week stretch in around May-ish, where he was kind of out of sorts, getting beat on elevated fastballs. But he's definitely looked like the complete hitter that they envisioned, and obviously looking like one of Jed's best offseason moves, probably outside of Shota Imanaga. And so, yeah, I think it's just he's at a point where obviously he has a lot of confidence. The team has confidence in him. And so, yeah, so I think for both short-term and long-term, him continuing to play this well through the end of the season would be huge.
I wanted to ask you about P. Crow Armstrong. Does it seem like it's trending towards him being the center fielder the rest of the way, even with Bellinger?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting with when Mike Tauchman comes back, of how he'll be worked back in. Obviously, there, I think, understandably, is maybe a little bit of a trust issue with, say, his defense in right field. Obviously, he showed off his arm in St. Louis, but I think there's always some fear now on pop-ups or fly balls heading his way. So I would expect him to get a lot of playing time. I think you look at what he does defensively and when he's on the bases. I mean, that's it. Both of those areas are just so elite that it's hard to take him out of the lineup, I think, right now. But at the same time, he cannot be a black hole, especially with how the bottom third of the lineup has been trending. So he definitely needs to get his swing rate under control. He can't be swinging at every pitch and immediately be behind 0-2. He needs to obviously have better command of the zone. As you can see, I mean, he if he did, he probably wasn't going to be swinging on those 2 pitches he homered on Sunday. But I think, like, obviously the offensive side is still evolving. It's still on the more raw end of things, but you can see the potential he has there. And he's just such a menace on the bases and in center field that I think it's going to be hard to not continue to play him regularly there. Obviously the challenge will become Tauchman, Bellinger, when he's ready to come back. What is that outfield / DH mix going to look like? Obviously that's kind of a problem for the future for them. So I think at least for, until Bellinger is back, I would expect, and I would hope that they continue to run him out in center field because just of the value he brings.
Couple Craig Counsell questions to close out our time. And again, thank you so much for being on. Now 98 games in, what is the player's relationship with Counsell?
I would say the big thing that I've heard a lot of guys appreciate is like his communication, just being upfront on things. And that's not to say David Ross wasn't, but it's a little different in terms of he will not mince things. Like, he'll be very honest. Like, he told Miles Mastrobuoni in, spring training, like, you're going to be a guy that goes up and down from AAA this year. And I don't know when your opportunity is going to come where you might get some regular playing time, but you have to be ready for it. And so I think it's the type of mindset instilling in guys of, even if you're not actively on the major league roster, if you're on the 40-man for sure, we're probably going to need your help this year. There's maybe 1 or 2 outliers to that, but like, especially on the pitching side, like, he made very clear, just because you're in Iowa does not mean you're not going to have an impact on this team. And so I think there's that element in terms of like the pitching staff, like a very common refrain, which I'm sure fans have heard based on post game interviews, is just like, he wants outgetters. Like, there is value in having some sort of set roles, but they don't have a Josh Hader or a Devin Williams where he knows like that's their ninth inning guy. So I think that's a mentality, like, where you talk to guys, like, you start hearing that lingo in their answers and responses. So I think there's buy-in on that end. And like, they know he's done this for a long time and has had a lot of success in that role. And I think there is something to that. When I know, he didn't win a World Series with Milwaukee, but like, he took teams that had less resources than the Cubs and organizationally there in Milwaukee and, got the most out of players. And so I think there's buy-ins on different levels. And I think you see that pay off with, the trust that has developed from players to Counsell, and Counsell still, I mean, I know we're a few months in now, but like, he's still learning his team and players and what they need and what approach is the best for each guy, and understanding, especially on the pitching side, okay, my eyes are telling me this guy is tired, even if maybe his pitch count isn't there, or, the inverse of that. So there's still a lot of learning going on between both sides, but I do think it starts with the communication aspect and just the honesty of situations.
Meghan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes. We'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcast. Wow, a packed show today. For Adam the Bull, for Meghan Montemurro, I'm Matt Cozy. This is Locked On Cubs.